Hello everybody and welcome to the Romanova music channel. Today we'll be discussing something incredibly important, critical if you will, and that concept is fixing bad rhythm. So if you have bad rhythm, this is going to be the video for you. Even if you have good rhythm, this is also going to be a good video for you because, let's face it, everybody can learn something new at some point in time. Now originally I had intended for this video to be for non-drummers, okay, since drummers always focus on rhythm right out of the gate, solely. Everything you do is banging on pots and pans or going bing, bing, boom, 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 ba, ba. Now we're going to translate that into other instruments today for guitar players, piano players, trumpets, because a lot of the times, let's face it, we put rhythm on the back burner because we're busy going boop, 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 moving in all sorts of different melodic directions that don't necessarily equate to boom, 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 boom. Although that boom, 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 boom is always there, and we're going to be covering that in some more detail during the course of this. Throughout my teaching career, I have met so many different types of people, different temperaments, different ways of learning things, totally different personalities, and I've had to elevate my own sense of understanding and sharpen my skills even further just to convey what I'm trying to tell to them. And let's face it, a lot of people, they just don't have it. Some people do have it, right? That natural inclination towards rhythm. And that's something we have to accept, is that some people have the gift and some people don't have the gift. Now, if you don't have the gift or you don't feel like you have the gift, then it's crucial that you listen to what I'm saying throughout the course of this video, because each point that I give is something that the person with the natural gift already understands out of the gate. Okay, so if you follow along, you're going to start to develop those skills afterward. Okay, you can still learn all of these skills even if you're not innately in tune with it. Okay, so it's not the end of the road for you. So please hang in there, for God's sake. Now, if you are a natural and you do have this gift, well, all of these points can just be reflection. You can reflect upon everything that you already know, and maybe you'll learn something new about yourself. Alright, so you're kind of rediscovering all the skills that you already have to maybe sharpen it even further, sort of how I have to do when I'm teaching somebody new. So before we get into the how of fixing this problem, we have to define what bad rhythm actually is. Bad rhythm constitutes as a whole bunch of different things, including, number one, not being able to count. So if you can't count, you're going to be lost. You're not going to know if there's 4 beats in a measure. You're not going to know if there's 3, because it's not going to matter to you. And you're not going to think it matters either until other people start giving you the stink eye who do know how to do these things. As a result, you're going to be playing uneven notes because you're not going to have any concept of the rhythm, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to be completely unsteady. You're going to be basically like falling down a flight of stairs as the equivalent, the metaphorical equivalent. Now, not having any feeling is another result of bad rhythm. You're just not within the vibration, okay? You're not feeling it out. And the ironic thing about this is that a lot of people with bad rhythm tend to have this idea that they're just feeling it out, man. You're just feeling out the rhythm. I don't need to know how to count because I'm just so cool. I can feel it out without even understanding or knowing what's going on. That's complete nonsense, and we're going to dispel that entirely, okay? So no just feeling it out, man, until you realize how to feel something out, okay? You have to understand where you are to know where you are and to feel where you are. Incredibly important thing to understand. And as a result of all of that, you just don't have a connection to the heartbeat. Somebody with bad rhythm doesn't have that pulse moving through them, that steady pulse. And what happens when your heart stops beating? Well, you die. So with all that said, let's get into 8 different ways that you can improve your rhythm right now. The first tip I'm going to give you is something I want you to carry throughout the entire video. And that is to think like a drummer, especially if you're not a drummer. If you are a drummer, you should already be thinking like a drummer, and if you're not, well, start thinking like a drummer because everybody will benefit from that. Now, if you're a non-drummer, thinking like a drummer will greatly improve your rhythm. Just have it in the back of your mind at all times. I'm thinking of this like a drummer. especially when you're trying to create rhythm and you're trying to get through a complex rhythmic passage. You want to be having that thought process, okay? And it's a totally different thought process. A drummer's mind is unlike any other musical mind. Trust me, I've met plenty of drummers. They're all very fickle people. Now, the best way to do this is to understand that when you're playing an instrument, let's say you're playing a guitar, you have your pick in your hand, you're striking those strings. Well, when you strike those strings, you are creating a percussive movement, all right? A strike, a pluck, a pick, a strum. Or on the piano, striking the chord. Those hammers going on the inside are hitting the strings on the inside of the piano. And that's exactly what drummers do when they hit their drums, right? They smack the drums, whether it's a snare drum, a tom-tom, it's all the same concept. A blow on a saxophone. You're creating a force that is moving air pressure. You're disturbing the air pressure around you, making that sound. So everybody's a percussionist at the end of the day. Even if your instrument is not classified primarily as being a percussive instrument, you are doing percussive things with your strums and your plucks and your... Now, that brings me to the most important part of this tip. I want everybody watching this to think of your rhythms as if you're hitting a snare drum. That's right. Ba, 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 ba. As comedically clunky and annoying as that is, it's going to help you a whole heck of a lot. You want to think of every single rhythm you play as being as obvious as maybe Lars's snare drum on the Black Album by Metallica. All those caveman fills. Ba, 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 ba. Just think of it like that. Everything you play as being a snare drum rhythm. All right, and big strokes too. One hand if you have to, especially for slower rhythms. Your slower rhythms especially need to be super, super, super advanced. They have to hit hard. That's basically what I'm saying. Everything that you play, you should be hitting hard with. So equating it to a snare drum is a good metaphor for any musician. So keep that in mind. The next tip for fixing bad rhythm, number 2, is understanding the grid and feeling out the grid. Now, what does that entail? What am I talking about when I use the word grid? Well, anybody who's ever worked within a DAW or digital audio workstation, you know, Pro Tools, Logic, any of those programs will understand what the grid is. Or if you don't, then probably look for that grid within the program because it exists within every single one of them. The grid is basically the roadmap of your song. It's all the time signatures, it's all the amount of beats, how many times things go, how many measures you have, and more importantly, how many notes fit within each beat. That's the grid, and you can make the grid as small or as large as possible. You can have a grid based on whole notes, for Christ's sake. You can have grids based on quarter notes, half notes, eighth notes, sixteenths. All right, so the faster it goes, the smaller the increments are going to be. Okay, and the grid is, like I said before, your roadmap. Like I was describing earlier, it's sort of helping you program that internal GPS. When you have a concept of, okay, what's my time signature here, and what's my time signature there, how many measures of that time signature do I have, and how many beats are within that time signature, right? How many beats are within those beats as well? Notes within beats. That's the entire concept. Now, the concept of the grid, that's been around since ancient times. It's been around forever. So there's no excuse to not learn how to do that. Trust me, Mozart was connected to the grid. He didn't need a DAW to be connected to the grid. Beethoven was connected to the grid. They understood. They became the matrix at a point. That's how crazy those guys were. And back then, they didn't have the computers to aid them, but they didn't need the computers. All they had was the concept. And that's basically what I'm trying to drill into your head right now. The grid. Tip number 3 is establishing a good heartbeat. Good rhythm starts before anything even begins. Okay, so before you even play a piece of music, make sure your count is established, right? If you're playing at this tempo, you want to make sure you're counting at that tempo, right? Here's the tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You want to keep everything consistent all the way through. You wouldn't believe how many drummers I've worked with over the years that just count like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then immediately slow down. It's completely unnatural. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know why anybody would do that, but it seems to be a natural inclination for somebody who doesn't have a natural sense of rhythm. So it's just something that's so simple that you can do right out of the gate before you even start playing a note. Alright, so like I said, you don't want to be counting a barn burner tempo and then start playing a ballad. It doesn't make any sense. Likewise, you don't want to be playing something fast and then count it off too slow. 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't make any sense because you're not setting everybody up correctly before you even start. So always make sure you're setting up the proper tempo before you begin. Okay, now I know I talked about the heartbeat as being more of a metaphorical thing, but this is the literal definition of that heartbeat. You want to make sure that heartbeat is not coming down with any kind of bad arrhythmia, if you know what I'm saying. You want to keep that heartbeat consistent and keep it good right before you start. Tip number 4 is to loosen up when you're too tight. And I don't mean tight as a compliment. Usually when you say, that's pretty tight, that's a good thing. No, I mean tight as in uptight or rigid, all right? Somebody that's too stiff, all right? As if somebody shoved a small rodent up where the sun don't shine, if you know what I'm saying, and you're just constantly like this all day, right? You don't want to play music like that. You want your eighth notes to swim. You want them to be liquid. Instead of... Right? You hear the difference? Or if you play a chord progression like this, I'm going to play a jazz progression that requires you to be somewhat loose. Watch, here's a stiff way of doing it, too tight. Right? Now loosen up. You see, my whole demeanor changed. Everything changed. The whole entire style of everything. I'm going to go back to stiff again. Ready? You don't want to play like that. You want to play it more like this. Loosen up. You might have to relax your shoulders a little bit, but you understand the concept now. If you're playing too tight or you feel like you're too uptight, loosen up. Take a deep breath, relax the shoulders a little bit, and don't worry about if you have an audience in front of you. I know stage fright is a thing, but just try to loosen up a little bit. Tip number 5 is the flip side of tip number 4. If you're playing too loose, you might want to tighten it up a little bit. Now, playing too loose can mean a lot of things. You might be a little too loosey-goosey. You might not be counting at all. That's typically where I find very loose playing. So I'll give you an example of that. Here's playing tight. Every step of the way, I had an idea of where I was at. I was bopping my head up and down, and I was putting some nice percussive mutes in the middle there and being very, very, very tight about it. Everything was right in the pocket, right? And when you're playing loose, none of that is going to be happening. It's going to be more like this. I have no concept of the grid anymore because I'm not even paying attention to it. I'm not bopping my head. I'm not getting my body involved, and I'm not putting any percussive mutes in there because, let's face it, if I start putting more in there, the whole thing is going to go even further off the rails. So that's an example of playing too loose, all right? Another example of playing too loose is if you had a few too many martinis before you had to hit the stage. I'm sure some of you might be able to relate to that, or if you've just been too intoxicated to begin with, well, that's the kind of thing that happens. You become too loosey-goosey, right? Like everybody at a Grateful Dead concert or a Fish show. Everybody's just getting down with the party, man. And this is another example of a bad rhythmic feel. Okay? You're just feeling it out, but you don't understand what you're feeling out, so it's just you acting like a buffoon in front of everybody. So long story short, don't play like you're drunk unless you can make it work, okay? Tip number 6 is a pretty obvious one, and wait a minute, what's that sound going on in the corner of my room? Am I just hearing things? Am I going crazy, or is there something tapping over there? Well, tip number 6 is a pretty obvious one. We should probably be using one of these. Anybody know what this is? That's called a metronome, and it just goes click, 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 click. I have this set at 120 beats per minute. That's the heartbeat that we have going here. Now obviously you have to put it on a flat surface in order to make it go, you know, consistently here. But this is an analog version of a metronome, so this is an actual metronome. But we have plenty of metronomes in digital format as well that could do everything that this metronome can do. This is just a more natural sound and a more natural feel, and it annoys you a lot more too, so I think that's a lot more important. It should be very annoying to learn the fundamentals. Check it out. Here's a really fast tempo. See? This thing can do it all. And guess what? People from the olden times, the days of yore, would use this. Now check this out. This is like the slowest tempo we can have. You want to be able to play at a tempo that's this slow. Ba-dum, 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 bum, bee-bum, ba-dum, ba-da-bum, bum, 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 ba-da-bum, bum. You want to make sure you can follow even the slowest of tempos and the fastest of tempos. Boom, bam, bing, bam, like Charlie Parker on a Wednesday afternoon. You know what I'm talking about. So let's stop the funny business with the metronome and let's move on with our lives. So after you've spent some time with that metronome, and I'm talking a lot of time with that metronome, we're going to get to tip number 7, which is probably the most important one of them all. And that is to tap your foot while you're playing. And that goes for everything. I want you to tap your foot every single time you pick up the instrument, okay? When you're playing along to a recording, when you're just playing by yourself, you want to establish that strong rhythm with your foot, developing that limb separation, okay? Remember, we want to think like a drummer. Might as well try to play a little bit like a drummer as well, all right? If we're playing a different instrument like the guitar, we're going to be using our hands as well as tapping our feet. So we'll have that innate limb separation, and we'll have a lot more in common with our drummer brethren, now won't we? Now, basically, you just want to keep this going, keep it consistent, don't speed up, and don't slow down. Like I said, you want to listen to that metronome beat and tap along to that metronome, right? Basically what you're going to do now is you're going to play on the beat of that foot tap. So start with quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Slap your knee if you have to. 3, 4. Once you get the hang of that, start doing eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. 16th notes. 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4E and a boom. Just like that. Now that's playing on the beat. Okay, so we're not syncopating anything at all. It's not complex, but we're going to complexify it. What I want you to do next is tap that foot and then start improvising. Play off of that count, like this. Hear that foot tap still going in the background. Doesn't matter how wacky things get on top of that count. If this heartbeat moves, you're sunk and you're going to be completely lost. Let's get the guitar involved here. Ready? And 1. Kind of silly, of course, but you got to make sure that foot tap never stops, right? Even if you're playing on the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, tap, 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 then start playing off. kind of silly too, but you understand the point of what I'm trying to get across. Keep tapping that foot no matter what you're playing, okay? Even if you're playing this. Tap, 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 tap. I got my head moving along with that as well. This is the most crucial point, and this is going to improve your rhythm by far the most of any technique or tip that I could possibly give you. Tip number 8 is not being afraid to go back to the 3rd grade. That's right, Billy Madison style, going all the way back to elementary school, relearning the basics. Basic quarter notes, just 1, 2, 3, 4. The simplest stuff you can imagine. There's rhythmic exercises all over the internet that you can find of just basic rhythms. Go back, tap your foot, and play along with them. Clap to it if you have to, right? Patty cake style. I'm serious. Go back to 3rd grade because you skipped out all the important stuff, all right? And trust me, there is no shame in reinforcing all of the things that you should have had down by the time of your 8th birthday, okay? Should have had this down when you turned 8. All right, maybe when you turn 9, that would be acceptable, but these things should have been done early and often, but you didn't do it. So here we are. We got to revisit. So put that party hat on, get those candles out and blow it out. Only put 8 candles on there because you're going back to 3rd grade and you're going to reinforce all these ideas that I talked about earlier in the video. All right, everybody. Hopefully this helped you out and you are now one step closer to fixing your bad rhythm. Just take all of those points together, mash them up into one big conundrum, and go for it. Trust me, you will thank yourself later, and your rhythm will improve 7-fold, perhaps even more than that. All right, everybody, have a good night, and I will see you another time.
Thanks everybody for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and consider becoming a patron on Subscribestar. Until the next time, peace.